These are all the records.
Lucy Rubin sat alone at the petitioner's table with a thick, three-ring binder resting on her lap. Across the courtroom, Randall Howard sat beside his attorney in a dark suit, looking more relaxed than Lucy had seen him in weeks. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Randall glanced across the room. His eyes moved from Lucy's face to the empty chair beside her. No lawyer, just Lucy, her binder, and a bottle of water. Randall gave a small shake of his head. She really came without a lawyer? Lucy heard him. She kept her eyes on the papers in front of her. The clerk called their case. Ms. Rubin? Lucy stood. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked down at the file. You are representing yourself today? Yes, Your Honor. Randall shifted in his chair. The corner of his mouth lifted. Lucy recognized that expression. He believed he had finally been proven right. For years, Randall had treated his higher income as proof that he understood their finances better. He had been the one making what he called the important decisions, while Lucy kept the records, tracked the bills, saved receipts, monitored insurance renewals, and stored years of financial documents. Whenever she questioned something, he had an answer. I'll handle it. You don't need to worry about that. You don't understand how these things work. For a long time, Lucy had accepted those answers, not because she was incapable, because she had believed keeping peace was more important than proving she knew what she was talking about. But 6 weeks earlier, after Randall filed for divorce and hired an attorney, Lucy had started looking at their finances differently. She opened old mortgage statements. She reviewed insurance records. She checked vehicle payments. She compared retirement statements. She went through tax documents and bank activity stretching back 11 years. At first, she had been frightened by how much she did not know. That fear almost made her quit. Instead, she started with one document, one date, one payment, one account. She built a timeline. She wrote down what the records actually showed. When something did not make sense, she marked it for verification. When she discovered she had made an incorrect assumption, she corrected it. She did not accuse Randall simply because a transaction looked unusual. She did not pretend to understand matters that required professional advice. She learned something far more useful. There was a difference between what she believed and what she could prove. That lesson had started with her mother, Loretta Rubin. When Lucy was 16, Loretta had taught her to keep important papers organized. Insurance policies, tax returns, receipts, official records, anything that might matter later. Her mother had always said the same thing. People forget conversations, paper remembers. Lucy never forgot those words. Now, sitting inside that courtroom, she placed one hand on the binder. Randall looked at it again. He seemed almost amused. He had expected Lucy to arrive frightened and unprepared. He expected the absence of a lawyer to make her surrender. What he did not understand was that Lucy had stopped trying to convince him she was intelligent. She was no longer interested in winning an argument with him. She was interested in knowing exactly what was true. The judge began reviewing the financial issues before the court. Randall leaned toward his attorney. Lucy opened her binder. Every section was labeled. Every page was numbered. Her notes were brief. Dates, amounts, questions, documents. She took a breath. Her hands were still slightly unsteady, but she did not close the binder. For the first time in 11 years, Randall's confidence no longer controlled the way Lucy saw herself. She did not need to know everything. She needed to know what was true. And she was about to show the courtroom that having no lawyer beside her did not mean she had nothing to say. To every single person listening right now, thank you for being here. Mr. Gerald Family is growing because of people like you who truly love meaningful and entertaining storytelling. Please support the channel by subscribing, because the woman sitting in that courtroom had not always been this careful with her own voice. 11 years earlier, she had met Randall under very different circumstances. At that time, she believed she had found a man who admired the very qualities he would eventually dismiss. And neither of them knew how much those qualities would matter when their marriage finally reached a courtroom. 11 years before Lucy Rubin sat alone in a courtroom, she was standing inside a neighborhood housing office with a stack of folders balanced against her chest. The office was busy that afternoon. Families were coming in with repair estimates, insurance papers, applications, and questions about work that needed to be done on their homes. Lucy had volunteered to help organize the paperwork because she was good at keeping track of details. She noticed Randall Howard because he was sitting beside an older homeowner who was struggling to understand a contractor's estimate. Randall did not rush the woman. He pointed to each number and explained what it meant. "Take your time," he told her. "We can go through it again." Lucy watched from across the room. When the woman finally understood the estimate, Randall stood and carried her folder to the front desk. Lucy smiled. "You explained that 3 times." Randall looked at her. She needed to hear it 3 times. Lucy laughed. "Most people would have given up after the second. I've got patience. I can see that." Randall looked at the folders in Lucy's arms. "You're the one keeping everything organized?" "Somebody has to." "I noticed." That was their first real conversation. There was nothing dramatic about it. Lucy was 30 years old, working steadily and building a life she was proud of. Randall was a few years older and already established in commercial property management. They had different personalities, but their differences worked well at first. Randall was confident. Lucy was careful. He liked making decisions quickly. She liked checking details before making them. He could walk into a room and start talking to almost anyone. Lucy listened first. Over the next few weeks, they kept seeing each other through the housing project. Their conversations became longer. Sometimes they talked about work. Sometimes they talked about their families. Sometimes they simply joked about how much paperwork could fit into one small office. Randall eventually asked Lucy to dinner. She agreed. Their first few dates were simple. They went to quiet restaurants where they could hear each other talk. They took long drives. They watched old movies at home. They cooked meals together, including a few that did not turn out very well. Lucy liked that Randall could make her laugh. Randall liked that Lucy made him slow down. Neither of them pretended to have everything figured out. They were simply 2 adults getting to know each other. Randall had grown up in a comfortable white family in the Midwest. His father owned a small construction business and his mother worked for the local school district. Money had always been discussed openly in his home. Bills were important. Savings were important. Owning a home was important. His father had taught him early that a man should be able to provide for his family. Randall took that lesson seriously. Lucy had grown up differently. Her black family was not poor, but money had to be handled carefully. Her mother, Loretta Rubin, taught Lucy to respect every dollar and keep important records organized. Household papers had their proper places. Receipts were saved. Insurance documents were stored carefully. Tax records were never treated casually. Lucy learned that organization was not about being afraid of money. It was about being prepared. That habit followed her into adulthood. Randall admired it when they were dating. He often joked that Lucy could find a receipt from 10 years earlier if somebody gave her enough time. She would laugh and tell him she probably could. Those differences did not create problems. They helped them. Randall encouraged Lucy to be more confident. Lucy encouraged Randall to think before acting. When they talked about buying a home, Randall focused on what they could afford. Lucy focused on the details. What is the insurance going to cost? How much will the property taxes be? What repairs are likely to come up? Randall would smile. "You've got a question for everything. And you're going to thank me when we need the answer." He laughed. "I probably will." For a while, that was their marriage. They disagreed without trying to defeat each other. They made decisions together. They worked. They saved. They built a home. Their wedding was modest. There was family, food, music, laughter, photographs, and plenty of advice from relatives. Loretta cried when she saw Lucy walking toward Randall. Randall's parents gave them a practical gift for their new home. Nobody needed an expensive celebration to prove the marriage mattered. The important part was that the 2 people standing together believed they were beginning something lasting. For several years, they were happy, not perfect, happy. Randall waited outside Lucy's workplace one rainy afternoon because she had forgotten her umbrella. Lucy drove across town late one night when Randall's father was hospitalized. They celebrated promotions. They argued about furniture. They laughed when dinner went wrong. They took weekend trips when their budget allowed. They made plans. They paid their bills. They handled ordinary problems that married couples handle every day. Lucy kept the household records. Randall managed many of the larger financial decisions. At the time, neither arrangement seemed dangerous. They trusted each other. When Randall earned a promotion, Lucy celebrated with him. When Lucy reached a goal at work, Randall was proud of her. They talked about the future. They discussed home improvements. They talked about retirement. They imagined growing older together. The important thing about those years was that Lucy's marriage had not been fake. She had not spent 11 years pretending to love a man she never cared about. She had loved Randall. Randall had loved her. That was what made the ending so painful. The problem did not begin with one terrible day. It began much later, through small changes that neither of them recognized at first. For now, Lucy still believed the man sitting across from her at dinner was the same man who had once sat beside an elderly homeowner and patiently explained a repair estimate 3 times. She believed their differences made them stronger. She believed the home they were building belonged equally to both of them. Most importantly, she still believed that when something important affected their marriage, they would face it together. She had no reason yet to believe otherwise. But Randall's career was about to change. His income would rise. His responsibilities would grow. His confidence would grow with them. Lucy would be proud of the man he was becoming. She simply would not know that, little by little, Randall would begin confusing financial success with greater authority. That change would take years. And when it finally became clear, Lucy would have to decide whether keeping peace was still worth remaining silent. Randall's career began moving faster after they bought their home. His work in commercial property management brought bigger responsibilities, more demanding clients, and eventually a much larger paycheck. Lucy was proud of him. When Randall received one of his first major raises, he came home smiling and handed her the paperwork. "Look at that." Lucy read the figure twice. "That is a big increase." "I told you things were going to change," Lucy smiled. "I knew you could do it." They celebrated that night at home. They did not spend much money. Lucy cooked dinner. Randall opened a bottle they had been saving. And they talked about what the extra income could mean for their future. They discussed paying down the mortgage. They talked about increasing their savings. Lucy suggested reviewing their insurance coverage. Randall agreed. At that point, nothing was wrong. The problem came later. As Randall earned more, people at work began treating him differently. He was trusted with larger properties and more complicated decisions. He became comfortable making financial judgments quickly. That confidence followed him home. One evening, Lucy sat at the kitchen table sorting through household bills. "Randall, the insurance premium went up again." "How much?" "Almost 12%. Randall barely looked away from his laptop. "We can afford it." "I know. I'm just saying we should adjust the budget." He looked at her. "Lucy, I make enough money. You don't have to worry about every little increase." Lucy kept sorting the papers. "I'm not worrying. I'm keeping track." "I know." He smiled, but there was something different about the way he said it. "You always have to track something." Lucy looked at him. She could have argued. Instead, she put the bill back into the folder. That was one small moment. Neither of them considered it important. There were more. Lucy knew when the mortgage payment changed. She knew when insurance policies renewed. She kept receipts for repairs. She knew which bills had been paid and which ones still needed attention. Randall handled the larger financial decisions. At first, that arrangement still worked. Then Randall began speaking as though his larger paycheck made his judgment more valuable. When Lucy questioned a repair estimate, he told her he would handle it. When she asked about a financial decision, he said she did not need to worry about it. When she raised a concern about spending, he reminded her that their income had changed. "You don't have to think about money the way you used to," he told her once. Lucy looked at him. "I still think about it. We're doing fine. I know we're doing fine." "Then trust me." She wanted to. So she did. That was where the imbalance began. Lucy was still contributing. She was still working. She was still keeping their household organized. But Randall increasingly treated those responsibilities as ordinary tasks while viewing his income as the thing that gave him authority. He did not wake up one morning and decide to disrespect his wife. His attitude changed gradually. A comment here, a decision made without her there, a concern dismissed. A financial question answered before she finished asking it. Lucy noticed. She simply did not challenge every moment. Part of her believed that marriage required compromise. Part of her believed Randall had earned the confidence he carried. She was proud of his success. She did not want her pride to turn into resentment. So when he said, "I'll handle it," she often let him. When he said, "You don't understand how these things work," she sometimes accepted the statement instead of asking him to explain. When he made a decision she disagreed with, she sometimes chose silence because she did not want another argument. The quiet felt easier. For a while, their home remained comfortable. They still laughed. They still went out together. Randall still helped around the house when he had time. Lucy still cared about him. That was what made the change difficult to name. Randall was not cruel every day. He could still be thoughtful. He could still make Lucy laugh. He could still come home with something she liked from the grocery store. He could still ask about her day. But when money came up, his tone changed. He became the authority. Lucy became the person expected to listen. One Saturday morning, they were discussing a home repair. Lucy had gathered 3 estimates. Randall looked at them. "This one is the best," Lucy pointed to another sheet. "This company has better terms." "I've looked at it." "So have I." Randall looked at her. "Lucy, this is what I do for a living." She lowered the paper. "I know. Then let me handle it." She nodded. All right. The conversation ended. The repair was completed. Nothing disastrous happened. That was part of the problem. Because every time Lucy surrendered a decision, life continued normally. There was no immediate punishment, no obvious consequence, no reason to believe the pattern would eventually affect something much bigger. Years passed. Randall's salary continued rising. Lucy remained organized and responsible, but she became less likely to challenge him. She began asking herself whether a question was worth raising before she asked it. She began thinking about how Randall might react before deciding whether to speak. That was a change in her, too. She was not being forced into silence. She was learning to choose it, and each time she did, Randall received another reason to believe he was right. Their financial roles became clearer. Randall earned more. Lucy managed much of the household administration, but Randall increasingly saw his role as decision-maker rather than simply higher earner. Lucy did not agree with that idea. She just did not fight it often enough. Years earlier, she had believed that being organized made her valuable. Now she sometimes wondered whether Randall saw that value at all. The answer would become clear later, not through one dramatic confrontation, through the slow distance that entered their marriage. Randall began working longer hours. His phone stayed close to him. Dinner schedules changed. Some weekends became separate. Their conversations became shorter. Lucy noticed all of it. She tried to reconnect. She suggested dinner. She asked about work. She tried to talk about plans for the house. Sometimes Randall listened. Other times he seemed somewhere else. Lucy kept trying because she still believed their marriage could return to what it had been. She did not know that Randall had already started thinking about a life without her. And while Lucy was still trying to save the relationship, Randall was quietly moving toward the decision that would change both of their lives. The final year of Lucy and Randall's marriage became quieter than either of them expected. Randall worked later. Sometimes he came home after Lucy had already eaten. Other nights, he sat at the kitchen table with his phone beside his plate and answered messages while she talked. Lucy noticed. She did not accuse him of anything. There was no clear evidence of an affair or some hidden relationship. She simply knew that the man who once wanted to hear about her day had become harder to reach. One evening, Lucy put 2 plates on the table. "You're home early." "Not really, I have to finish something." "You just got here." "I know." He sat down and checked his phone. Lucy waited. "Can we eat without work tonight?" Randall looked up. "I've had a long day." "So have I." He put the phone down. "All right." They ate. The conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. Lucy tried to talk about a problem at work. Randall listened but gave short answers. She asked about a property he had mentioned earlier that week. He said it was handled. She stopped asking. After dinner, Randall returned to his laptop. Lucy cleaned the kitchen alone. Nothing about the evening looked unusual from the outside. That was what made the situation so difficult. Their marriage was not filled with constant shouting. There were no broken dishes, no dramatic accusations. Their relationship was simply losing its closeness. Their weekends changed too. Randall sometimes worked. Lucy visited her mother or stayed home. They stopped making plans together. Even small decisions became separate. Lucy began noticing that she was no longer automatically included when Randall discussed his schedule. She tried to bring them closer. One Saturday morning, she stood in the kitchen making coffee. "Would you like to go out tonight?" Randall was reading something on his phone. "Maybe." "You said that last weekend." "I've been busy." "I know." He looked at her. "What do you want me to do?" Lucy stared at him. "I want us to spend some time together." Randall sighed. "I don't know what you want from me." She lowered her eyes. "Nothing." That answer ended the conversation. But Lucy knew it was not true. She wanted her husband back. She wanted the man who used to wait for her after work. She wanted the man who laughed when she corrected his grocery list. She wanted the man who once told her that her attention to detail was one of the things he admired most about her. She still believed that man was somewhere inside Randall. She did not realize that Randall had already reached a different conclusion about their marriage. One evening, Lucy was sitting on the couch when Randall walked into the room. He did not sit down immediately. He stood near the doorway. Lucy looked at him. "What is it?" Randall took a breath. "We need to talk." Lucy knew from his expression that this was not about work. She placed the remote on the table. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." Those words frightened her more than an argument would have. Randall sat across from her. "I think we've reached the end." Lucy stared at him. "What does that mean?" "I want a divorce." For several seconds, Lucy could not respond. She looked around the room they had built together. The couch had been chosen after 3 weekends of shopping. The dining table had been a compromise. The framed photographs on the wall showed years of birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, and ordinary weekends. She looked back at Randall. "You've already decided?" Randall lowered his eyes. "I've been thinking about it for a long time." "How long?" "I don't know." Lucy understood what that meant. He had been preparing himself while she was still trying to repair their marriage. She asked the question that hurt most. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how." "You could have talked to me." "I know." Lucy sat quietly for a moment. "Do you still love me?" Randall struggled with the answer. "I care about you." Lucy nodded slowly. That was not the answer she wanted, but it was the answer he gave. The next few weeks changed the rhythm of her life. Randall hired an attorney. Lucy began looking for legal assistance. She contacted several lawyers and asked about representation. The consultations alone made her nervous. The retainers were more than she could comfortably afford without using a large portion of the savings she would need once the marriage ended. One evening, Lucy sat at the kitchen table with her bank statement in front of her. She looked at the balance. She looked at the legal fees. She looked at the mortgage information. For the first time, the financial consequences of the divorce felt real. She whispered to herself, "How did I get here?" Her mother had taught her not to panic before knowing the facts. Lucy reached for a folder. She started with what she had: mortgage statements, insurance records, tax returns, bank statements, vehicle records, retirement information, credit card statements. She placed them across the table. At first, she only wanted to understand her own financial position. She needed to know what money was available. She needed to know what debts existed. She needed to know which bills were in her name. She needed to understand what she could realistically afford after the divorce. Lucy had kept many of these records for years. She had never expected to need them this way. As she compared her records with the financial information Randall had provided, one number caught her attention. She checked it again. The figure did not match. Lucy pulled another statement from the folder. That number was different too. She checked the dates. She checked the accounts. She did not know what the differences meant. That distinction mattered. She was no longer willing to decide what something meant simply because it frightened her. Lucy took out a notebook. She wrote down the first figure, then the second. Underneath them, she wrote the dates. She added a short note about where each number came from. She did not call Randall. She did not accuse him. She kept going. Another figure did not match. Lucy checked the original document. This one needed more information. She marked it. Her kitchen table slowly filled with records. For years, Randall had assumed Lucy was simply the person who knew where the tax folder was. He did not know she was now comparing 11 years of financial information. He did not know she was building a record of what they owned, what they owed, and what she could actually prove. Most importantly, he did not know that Lucy had stopped accepting his confidence as evidence. She was frightened. She was overwhelmed. She did not know what the divorce would cost her, but she had started doing the one thing she could control. She was learning the facts. The next morning, Lucy returned to the financial records before going to work. She wrote 3 headings across a fresh page. What I know, what I need to verify, what I need help understanding. She looked at the page for a long moment. The divorce was still painful. The future was uncertain. But Lucy was no longer willing to enter that future without understanding what belonged to her. She gathered the documents into one binder. That binder would soon become the most important object she carried into court. And before the divorce was over, Lucy would discover that the numbers Randall believed she would never examine could change everything about how she understood the marriage they had built together. The next morning, Lucy carried the binder to work. She kept it inside her bag and did not open it until she returned home that evening. The divorce papers were still on the kitchen counter. Randall's attorney had already sent requests for financial information, and Lucy knew she could not keep handling everything by herself. She searched for legal assistance and eventually contacted legal aid. A few days later, Lucy met Maris Caldwell. Lucy arrived with the binder tucked under her arm. Maris looked at it when Lucy sat down. "You brought your records?" "Yes." "Good. What do you believe is wrong?" Lucy opened the binder. "I think some of Randall's financial information doesn't match what I have." Maris looked at her carefully. "Do you know that?" Lucy stopped. "I know some numbers are different. That is not the same thing." Lucy looked down at the documents. "No." Maris pointed toward the binder. "That's going to be important." Lucy waited. "You are going through a divorce," Maris said. "You are not conducting an investigation by yourself. Your job is to understand your records, preserve documents, identify questions, and tell the truth about what you know. Lucy nodded. Maris continued. If a document proves something, keep it. If you have a question, write it down. If something looks unusual, don't decide what it means until you have enough information. Lucy looked at her. So I shouldn't say Randall hid money? Not unless you have evidence that establishes that. Lucy closed the folder. What if I think something is wrong? Write down why you think it is wrong, then find out whether the records support you. That answer relieved Lucy more than she expected. She had been afraid that she needed to understand every financial document before she could protect herself. Maris corrected that idea. You don't have to become a lawyer, she said. You need to understand your own records well enough to recognize what needs professional attention. Lucy nodded. That was different from what she had been trying to do. She had been trying to prove that she was capable. Maris was teaching her to be careful instead. Lucy pulled out her notebook. What should I start with? Start with what you know. Lucy wrote it down. What I know. Then list what you need to verify. Lucy added the second heading. Maris continued. And when you reach something you don't understand, don't guess. Lucy wrote the third heading. What I need help understanding. Maris nodded. That is enough for today. Lucy looked at the pages. 3 simple categories. What she knew. What she needed to verify. What required help. For the first time since Randall asked for the divorce, the paperwork seemed manageable. Not easy, manageable. Before leaving, Lucy asked one more question. What if Randall says I don't understand any of this? Maris looked directly at her. Then let the records speak for themselves. Lucy closed the binder. She thanked Maris and left. She did not feel like an expert. She felt more grounded. That mattered. When she got home, Lucy called Keisha Rowland. Keisha had been her friend for years and worked as a payroll specialist. Lucy knew Keisha understood ordinary financial records, including pay statements, deductions, and income information. Keisha answered. What's going on? I need help understanding some financial records. Your divorce? Yes. Keisha became serious. I can help you understand the records. I can't give you legal advice. I know, and I'm not getting involved with Randall. I don't want you to. Good. Lucy smiled. Maris told me something similar. She sounds sensible. She is. Keisha agreed to come over. That evening, Lucy cleared the kitchen table. The papers came out of the binder. Bank statements went into one pile. Mortgage statements went into another. Tax records went beside them. Insurance documents followed. Then came vehicle records, credit card statements, and retirement documents. Keisha looked at the table. You were serious. Lucy gave a tired smile. I don't know where to start. Start with 1 year. Lucy looked at the piles. There are 11 years. We're not doing 11 years tonight. Keisha picked up the oldest set of bank statements. 1 year. Lucy nodded. They started. Keisha explained the difference between gross income and take-home pay. She explained deductions. She helped Lucy understand how ordinary payroll information connected with the records she already had. But she stayed within her limits. Whenever something moved beyond ordinary financial records, Keisha said so. That is something you need to ask a qualified professional about. Lucy accepted that. She was beginning to understand that asking for help did not make her less capable. It made her more careful. They worked through the first year. Lucy recorded dates. She wrote down account information. She matched payments with documents. She compared what she had kept with what Randall had reported. Nothing dramatic appeared. That was fine. Maris had taught her not to search for a conclusion. She was looking for facts. Keisha picked up another statement. Check this payment. Lucy leaned closer. Why? It may have an explanation, but we should see what document matches it. Lucy searched through the folder. She found a receipt. The payment was connected to a home repair. She wrote the explanation beside the transaction. Good, Keisha said. Lucy continued. The work was slow. It was also teaching her something. For years, Randall had handled many of the larger financial decisions because he earned more. Lucy had accepted that arrangement. Now she was learning that earning more money did not mean knowing every detail of a family's finances. She did not need to compete with Randall. She needed to understand her own financial life. By the time Keisha left, the kitchen table was still covered with papers. But the confusion had been reduced. Lucy placed the records back into the binder. She opened her notebook. Under the 3 headings she had already written several entries. She looked at the first page, then she added one more sentence beneath them. Do not assume, verify. That became the rule Lucy carried into the next stage of the divorce. She did not know yet that one account would soon force her to test that rule. Lucy continued the financial review 1 year at a time. She kept the binder open on the kitchen table and worked through the records after work. The process was not exciting. That was exactly why she trusted it. A payment appeared on one statement. She looked for the matching record. If she found it, she recorded the explanation. If she did not, she marked it for review. She did not try to decide what every number meant. She simply kept moving. By the time she reached the 7th year of the marriage, Lucy had become comfortable with the process. She knew which documents belonged together. She knew how to compare dates. She knew when an amount needed another record before she could draw a conclusion. One evening, she was reviewing an account Randall had described as having very little activity. Lucy checked the statement. Then she checked the next month. There was a transfer. She looked at the following statement. Another transfer. She turned the page. Another. Lucy looked at the amounts again. They were not identical, but they followed a pattern. She reached for her notebook. She wrote the account number, then the dates, then the amounts. She checked Randall's financial information. The account had been described differently. Lucy looked back at the statements. Something did not match. Her first thought was simple. Why had Randall described the account that way? Her second thought was stronger. Maybe he had been hiding something. Lucy reached for her phone. She almost called him. She wanted an explanation immediately. Then she remembered what Maris had told her. Do not decide what something means before the evidence supports it. Lucy put the phone down. She opened her notebook. Under the transaction details, she wrote, verify. She underlined the word once. That was all. The next morning, she continued working. She checked whether the transfers corresponded with another account. She checked the dates against their household records. One transfer had occurred around the time they paid for a major home repair. Lucy found the contractor's receipt. That transaction had an explanation. She marked it. Another transfer did not match anything she could find. She did not label it suspicious. She wrote, needs documentation. A third transfer appeared several months later. Again, no matching record. Lucy added it to the list. The more she worked, the more she understood why Maris had insisted on separating facts from assumptions. A number could look strange and still have a reasonable explanation. A number could look ordinary and still require more information. The document had to come first. Lucy started building a financial timeline. She began with the year they bought the house. She recorded the original mortgage, then the vehicle loan, then the insurance policies, then their joint checking account. She added retirement contributions. She continued through each year of the marriage. The work took time. Some evenings she managed only a few pages. Other nights she worked for hours. She never tried to finish everything in one sitting. She knew exhaustion could lead to mistakes. Keisha had already warned her about that. Don't rush because you're scared, she had told her. Lucy remembered those words whenever she wanted to move too quickly. One Friday evening, Lucy found another transaction that concerned her. It was a larger transfer. The date was several years old. She checked the surrounding statements. There were 2 related transactions. Lucy felt her stomach tighten. She looked at Randall's financial disclosure. The information still did not make sense. This time, she did not reach for the phone. She opened her notebook. She wrote the date. She wrote the amount. She wrote where she found the information. Then she wrote, question. Lucy sat back. She realized something had changed. A few weeks earlier, she would have called Randall and demanded an answer. Now she knew that an answer from Randall would only be one piece of information. She needed documentation. She continued checking. The next statement showed money moving back into the account. That changed her understanding. Lucy looked at the transaction again. It might have been a temporary transfer. It might have had another explanation. She did not know yet. So she left it under needs verification. The discipline was difficult. Lucy wanted certainty. The records gave her questions. She kept going anyway. Over the next several days, she found explanations for some of the transactions she had marked. One payment had been connected to a vehicle expense. Another had been related to a home repair. A third had been money moved between accounts they both knew about. Each time, Lucy corrected her notes. She did not feel disappointed when a transaction turned out to be ordinary. She felt relieved. She was not trying to prove Randall had done something wrong. She was trying to understand what had happened to their money. That distinction protected her from making the same mistakes she had made in the marriage. For years she had accepted Randall's statements because she trusted his confidence. Now she refused to replace his confidence with her own assumptions. The records had to speak first. Late one evening, Lucy reached the end of another set of statements. She compared the totals. One figure still did not reconcile. She checked it twice. Then a third time. The difference remained. Lucy opened the drawer beside the table and pulled out another folder. Nothing. She checked an older statement. Still nothing. She wrote the amount in her notebook. Under it she added, "I don't know yet." Lucy looked at those 4 words. They did not frighten her anymore. Not knowing was no longer a reason to panic. It was a reason to investigate carefully, or ask someone qualified. She closed the binder for the night. The next morning she returned to the account. This time she noticed something she had missed before. A reference number appeared beside one of the transfers. Lucy checked another document. The same reference number appeared there. She pulled out the corresponding record. The transfer had a legitimate explanation. Lucy marked it as resolved. One more question had disappeared, but the larger discrepancy remained. Lucy knew she would eventually have to bring it to Maris. For now, she kept documenting everything. She had begun the divorce afraid that she did not know enough. Now she understood that careful work did not require knowing everything at once. It required patience. It required honesty. It required the willingness to correct yourself when the records proved you wrong. Lucy placed the notebook beside the binder. The word verify was still written across the page. She had no idea yet what the unresolved transfers would mean. But she knew one thing. She would not let fear decide the answer before the evidence did. Lucy arrived at the courthouse with her binder held close against her side. She had spent days preparing for the hearing. Every document was organized. Every question was written down. She had separated the statements by year and marked the transactions that still needed clarification. She believed she was ready. The moment she entered the courtroom, she realized preparation could not make the process simple. Randall was already there with his attorney. His attorney had a thick folder open in front of him and several papers arranged across the table. Lucy took her seat. The clerk called the case. The judge reviewed the documents before looking toward Lucy. "Ms. Rubin, you are representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge nodded. The hearing began. Randall's attorney spoke first. He used legal terms Lucy had heard before but did not fully understand. He referred to documents by names she had never used in everyday life. Lucy followed as carefully as she could. She wrote notes. She checked her binder. She tried to keep up. For a few minutes she felt confident. Then the judge asked about a financial document Lucy had submitted. "Ms. Rubin, do you have the supporting statement for this figure?" Lucy searched through the binder. She knew she had the statement. She turned one page, then another. She found a document with the correct account number, but the date was wrong. Her stomach tightened. She had brought the wrong version. Lucy looked at the judge. "I have the statement, Your Honor. I brought an earlier copy." The judge looked at the document. "We need the correct supporting record." "Yes, Your Honor." Lucy wrote it down across the room. Randall looked at his attorney. His attorney said nothing, but Randall's expression told Lucy he had noticed the mistake. The hearing continued. Lucy answered what she could. When she did not understand something, she asked for clarification. Still, she left the courthouse frustrated. Outside, she stood beside the entrance holding the binder. Randall walked toward her. "You see what I mean?" Lucy looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You're trying to handle something you don't understand." "I made one mistake." "It wasn't just one mistake." Lucy tightened her grip on the binder. "I brought the wrong statement." "Exactly." "You think that proves I don't know anything?" Randall shook his head. "I think it proves this is more complicated than you realize." Lucy looked at him. He was not shouting. That almost made his words harder to hear. He sounded certain. The same certainty she had heard throughout their marriage. The certainty that had made her question herself whenever money came up. "You should hire a lawyer," Randall said. Lucy looked down at the binder. "I know I need professional help when something is beyond me." "Then you should admit that." "I already know my limits." Randall gave her a doubtful look. "You don't have to prove anything to me." Lucy looked at him. "I know." She walked toward her car. Inside, she placed the binder on the passenger seat. For several minutes, she stared at it. The mistake bothered her. Not because Randall had seen it, because she had made it. She had checked that document before leaving home. She had believed it was the correct statement. It was not. That meant she had more work to do. But Randall's words stayed with her. "You don't understand." For years, those words had carried more weight than they should have. Lucy drove home. Keisha was waiting for her call. "How did it go?" "I brought the wrong statement." Keisha listened. "Did the judge let you know what was needed?" "Yes." "Then you know what to fix." Lucy sat at the kitchen table. "It made me feel like I don't know what I'm doing." Keisha answered immediately. "You made a mistake." "I know." "That doesn't mean you know nothing." Lucy looked at the binder. I thought I was prepared. You were prepared, you just weren't perfect. Lucy sighed. I don't want Randall to be right about me. Keisha became serious. Then stop making this about Randall. Lucy looked at her. This is about you understanding your records. Lucy nodded. Keisha continued. If the document says it, write it down. If the document doesn't say it, don't add your own explanation. Lucy picked up her notebook. That is what Maris told me. Then follow it. Lucy corrected the entry. She removed the incorrect statement. She located the proper record. She checked the date. Then she checked the account number. This time she checked it again. She added a note explaining the correction. The embarrassment began to fade. The mistake had taught her something the binder could not. Preparation was not about making herself look knowledgeable. It was about making sure the information she presented was accurate. Lucy continued reviewing the records that night. She found another document she had misunderstood. She corrected that too. She did not hide either mistake. She wanted her records to reflect the truth, even when the truth showed that she had been wrong. By midnight, the binder looked different. There were corrected pages, additional notes, clear labels, questions that still needed answers. Lucy closed it. The next morning, she contacted Maris about the financial issue that remained too complicated for her to interpret alone. Maris reviewed what Lucy had documented. You handled the mistake correctly. I felt embarrassed. That's normal. I thought I had to know everything. You don't. Lucy looked at her. What do I need to know? Maris answered simply. What is yours to understand what requires verification and what requires professional advice? Lucy nodded. That distinction finally made sense. She was not trying to become a lawyer. She was not trying to become an accountant. She was trying to stop being intimidated by documents that affected her own life. The next court date was approaching. This time, Lucy prepared differently. She did not simply carry a thick binder. She knew what each section contained. She knew which documents supported which figures. She knew which questions remained unanswered. She also knew which matters she needed professional assistance with. When Lucy entered the courthouse again, Randall noticed the difference. The binder was larger. The sections were clearly labeled. Lucy walked to her seat, placed the binder on the table, and opened it to the first page she needed. Randall looked at her. He no longer saw a woman carrying a pile of papers. He saw someone who had learned from her first mistake. Lucy did not look toward him. She checked her notes. The clerk called the case. Lucy was ready to listen. This time, she understood something important. She did not need to convince Randall that she was capable. She needed to make sure every statement she made could be supported by the records in front of her. That would become the standard she followed for the rest of the divorce. Lucy began the next morning with the binder open beside her coffee. The first court hearing had changed the way she worked. She no longer measured her preparation by how many papers she could carry. She measured it by whether she understood what each paper actually showed. At the top of a fresh page, she wrote 3 headings: reported, documented, needs verification. She had used the categories before, but now she understood why they mattered. A statement from Randall belonged under reported. A bank statement belonged under documented. A transaction she could not explain belonged under needs verification. She did not mix them. Lucy started with the earliest year of the marriage and worked forward. She recorded the date they bought the house. She recorded the original mortgage. She added their vehicle payments. She listed insurance payments. She recorded retirement contributions and major household expenses. The work took several evenings. Some records answered questions she had been carrying for weeks. One payment that had looked unusual turned out to match a home repair invoice. Another transfer she had questioned was simply money moved between accounts they both knew about. Lucy crossed those items off her list. She felt relieved each time. She was not looking for wrongdoing. She was looking for accuracy. One evening she reached a credit card account she had seen mentioned in the financial records. Lucy had always thought the balance belonged to Randall. She remembered him using the card more often than she did. She remembered several purchases he had made with it. So when she saw the balance listed among the debts, she assumed it was his responsibility. She wrote the account number in her notebook. Then she found the original agreement. Lucy read the first page. She turned to the next. Her expression changed. She checked the account number again. Her name was on the agreement. Lucy read the document a second time. She had been wrong. The debt was not entirely Randall's. She had been so focused on checking his financial information that she had failed to question one of her own assumptions. Lucy leaned back from the table. For a moment, she felt embarrassed. She had spent weeks telling herself that she needed evidence. Yet she had just done exactly what Maris warned her not to do. She had taken what she believed and treated it as fact. Lucy picked up her notebook. Under the account number she wrote, "My assumption was wrong." She looked at the sentence. She could have left it there. Instead, she wrote another line. "Correct the record." Lucy opened the financial worksheet and changed the information. She did not try to make the debt look smaller. She did not leave out her own responsibility. She corrected it. The mistake bothered her, but it also taught her something important. Being prepared did not mean being right all the time. Being prepared meant being willing to find out when she was wrong. Lucy returned to the other records. She began checking her earlier conclusions more carefully. A transaction she had marked for review was supported by another statement. She moved it into the documented section. Another payment still lacked an explanation. She left it under needs verification. She did not force either one into a category just because she wanted the process finished. The timeline grew. Year by year, Lucy could see how the family's finances had changed. Their income had increased. The mortgage had changed, insurance costs had changed, vehicle expenses had changed, retirement contributions had changed. Some years were easier to understand than others. She recorded everything she could verify. When something remained unclear, she left it alone until she had enough information. The process was teaching her patience. It was also changing how she saw Randall. For years she had thought of him as the person who understood money better because he earned more. Now she could see that income and financial knowledge were not the same thing. She also saw that her own careful habits did not make her automatically correct. Both things could be true. Randall could be wrong about something. Lucy could also be wrong about something. The records were what mattered. That realization made her calmer. Later that evening, Keisha came over. Lucy showed her the credit card agreement. "I thought Randall was responsible for this." Keisha read the document. "You were wrong." "I know." Keisha looked at her. "You corrected it?" "Yes." "Good." Lucy gave her a tired smile. "You know, I didn't like seeing my own mistake. Nobody does. I wanted to find problems with Randall's information." Keisha nodded. "And?" "I realized I could make mistakes too. That is why you keep checking." Lucy looked at the binder. "I thought being prepared meant knowing what I was doing. It means knowing what you know." Lucy nodded. "And knowing what you don't." "Exactly." Lucy placed the agreement back into its section. She did not feel defeated. She felt more honest. That mattered more. The next morning, Lucy added another note to the first page of her timeline. "Evidence comes before conclusion." She read it once. Then she continued working. By the time she reached the later years of the marriage, the timeline was beginning to show a clearer picture. Some of Randall's figures matched her records. Some needed clarification. Some of Lucy's original assumptions had been wrong, but one issue remained. There were financial transactions she still could not explain. Lucy marked them carefully. She did not accuse Randall. She did not excuse him either. She simply documented what she knew. For the first time, she understood the real value of the binder. It was not a weapon against Randall. It was a way to keep herself honest. Lucy closed the binder when she finished for the night. The divorce was still painful. She still did not know how everything would turn out. But she no longer needed to prove that she was smarter than Randall. She only needed to make sure she was telling the truth. That would matter at the next hearing, because one of the financial figures she had been tracking still did not match her records. Lucy arrived at the courthouse with the corrected binder. This time she knew exactly where every document belonged. The pages were numbered. The sections were labeled. The financial timeline was near the front. Behind it were the statements supporting each entry. She also had a separate page listing the figures that still needed clarification. Lucy checked the binder once before entering the courtroom. She did not check it again. She knew it was ready. Randall was already seated beside his attorney. He looked at Lucy when she walked in. His expression changed slightly when he saw the binder. During their first hearing, he had watched her struggle to locate the correct statement. This time she sat down calmly and placed the binder on the table. The clerk called the case. The judge reviewed the file. The hearing began. Randall's attorney presented several financial figures. Lucy listened. She did not interrupt. She wrote down the amounts as they were mentioned. One figure caught her attention. It was the same figure she had been unable to reconcile with her records. Lucy checked the corresponding page in her binder. The amount listed by Randall's side did not match the statement she had. She did not immediately accuse him of giving false information. She raised her hand when it was appropriate. The judge acknowledged her. "Ms. Rubin, I have a document that may clarify that figure." The judge looked toward her. "Do you have it with you?" "Yes, Your Honor." Lucy opened the binder. She turned directly to the numbered page. She handed over the document through the proper process. The judge reviewed it. Lucy waited. Randall looked at her. She did not look back. The judge compared the document with the figure already before the court. "This appears to be a different amount." "Yes, Your Honor. Do you know why?" "No, Your Honor." Randall's attorney looked at the statement. Lucy continued, "I only know that the amount on this statement is different from the figure listed in the financial information." The judge nodded. That distinction is important. Lucy sat back. She had not accused Randall. She had not claimed to know why the numbers differed. She had simply shown the court what her document said. That was enough. The judge asked that the discrepancy be addressed through the appropriate financial disclosures. Randall's attorney agreed. Randall looked irritated. Lucy could see that he wanted the matter finished, but the court needed accurate information. The hearing continued. Another figure was discussed. Lucy checked her notes. This one matched her records. She did not say anything. She had learned that not every financial statement required her response. When something was correct, she left it alone. When something needed clarification, she presented the supporting record. The hearing moved forward. Lucy listened carefully. She wrote down what she did not understand. She marked the documents she needed to review later. She did not try to speak simply to prove that she was prepared. By the time the hearing ended, Lucy felt tired but more confident. She had not won anything. She had simply handled herself better. Outside the courtroom, Randall approached her. "You're making this look like I'm hiding something." Lucy looked at him. "I'm not saying that. You keep bringing up differences in the numbers. Because the numbers are different. That doesn't mean I'm dishonest. I didn't say you were." Randall frowned. "Then what are you trying to do?" Lucy held the binder against her side. "Understand the finances." "You're making everything harder. I am trying to understand what belongs in the financial records." Randall shook his head. "You don't trust me." Lucy answered honestly. "This isn't about trust." He stared at her. "It used to be." "I know." Lucy looked down at the binder. "For years, I trusted you to handle things I didn't understand. Now that we're getting divorced, I have to understand them for myself." Randall did not answer. Lucy continued, "If the records support what you say, that's fine. If they don't match, I need to know why. That's all." Randall looked frustrated. "You could have just asked me." Lucy looked at him. "I did that for years." That sentence ended the conversation. Randall walked away. Lucy remained outside for a moment before heading toward her car. She thought about what she had said. She had not wanted to hurt him. She had not wanted to accuse him. She had simply stated what had happened for years. She had asked questions and accepted answers without checking the underlying records. The divorce had forced her to change that. When Lucy returned home, she placed the binder on the kitchen table. She opened the financial timeline. The disputed figure was still marked. She added a note about what happened at the hearing. The judge had requested clarification, that was all. Lucy did not write anything beyond what she knew. She closed the binder. The next morning she contacted Maris. She explained what happened. Maris listened. "You handled it correctly. I was afraid I would sound accusatory." "You didn't accuse anyone. I only presented the document." "Exactly." Lucy felt relieved. Maris reminded her that the court needed facts, not conclusions. Lucy understood that better now. Later that week, another set of financial documents arrived. Lucy opened them at the kitchen table. She expected another ordinary review. Instead, she found a problem that was more complicated than anything she had handled before. It involved retirement money. There were tax consequences. There was also a transaction Randall had described as ordinary. Lucy read the documents carefully. She understood enough to know that she did not understand everything. For the first time, that realization did not frighten her. She knew exactly what to do. She closed the folder. She wrote the issue in her notebook. Underneath it she wrote, "Professional review needed." Lucy had finally learned that knowing her limits was not a weakness. It was part of being prepared. And this time, she was not going to pretend otherwise. Lucy opened the retirement documents again that evening. She read through the statements slowly. The figures were larger than the amounts she had been reviewing in the household accounts, and the consequences were harder to understand. There were retirement contributions. There were account values. There were tax considerations. There was also a transaction Randall had described as ordinary. Lucy compared the transaction with the information she already had. She could identify the date. She could identify the amount. She could identify the account. What she could not determine was how the transaction should be treated in the divorce. Lucy closed the folder. She knew enough to know that she needed help. The next morning she contacted Maris. "I found something involving the retirement account." Maris asked her to explain what she had found. Lucy described the transaction and the figures she had documented. Maris listened carefully. "Do you understand what the transaction means?" "No." "Good." Lucy looked at the phone. "Good?" "Yes. You know that you don't understand it." Lucy smiled. "I thought you were going to tell me to figure it out." "No, this is exactly where you stop guessing." Maris explained that retirement assets could involve legal and tax issues that could not be settled simply by comparing two statements. Lucy understood. "So I should document what I know and get the right professional help?" "Exactly." Lucy opened her notebook. She wrote down the account information, then the transaction date, then the amount. She added the documents supporting each figure. At the bottom of the page she wrote, "Needs professional review." She did not add an explanation she could not prove. That decision marked another change in Lucy. Earlier in the divorce, she had felt pressure to demonstrate that she could handle everything herself. Now she understood that competence included knowing when another person had the right expertise. She arranged for the appropriate professional review through the legal process. The records were examined carefully. Lucy learned that the transaction could not be judged simply by looking at the amount that moved from one account to another. The timing mattered, the source of the funds mattered, the purpose of the transaction mattered, the tax treatment mattered. Most importantly, the documentation mattered. Lucy listened and took notes. She did not pretend to understand every technical term. When something was unclear, she asked for an explanation. That was another lesson she had learned. She was allowed to ask. Nobody expected her to know everything. The more she learned, the more complicated the financial picture became. That did not frighten her as much as it once would have. She understood that complicated did not mean impossible. It meant she had to handle each issue at the proper level. Lucy returned to her timeline. She added the retirement transaction. She attached the supporting records. She noted which information had been confirmed and which still required clarification. The binder became more organized. It was no longer simply a collection of old paperwork. It was a record of the financial history of her marriage. Meanwhile, Randall was beginning to realize that the divorce was not going the way he expected. His attorney had started asking him more questions. Where did certain transfers come from? Why did particular amounts appear differently in different records? What documentation supported the transactions? Randall answered some questions easily. Others required him to search through his own files. One evening he sat at home reviewing documents his attorney had requested. He became frustrated. He called Lucy. "Why are they asking about these old transactions?" Lucy answered calmly. "Because they need the records. I already gave them the information. Some of the figures don't match the statements. That doesn't mean anything. I didn't say it did." Randall became irritated. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "What do you want from me?" Lucy looked at the binder. "I don't want anything from you." "Then why are you doing this?" "Because we're getting divorced." Randall said nothing. Lucy continued. "I need the financial information to be accurate. You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be. I am not deciding what anything means." She looked at the notes in front of her. "I am documenting what the records show." Randall ended the call. Lucy put the phone down. She did not feel victorious. She felt tired. The process was taking longer than she had hoped. But the difference between Lucy now and Lucy at the beginning of the divorce was clear. She no longer needed Randall to agree with her before she trusted a document. She also no longer assumed every discrepancy proved he had done something wrong. She was following the evidence. A few days later, additional financial records arrived. Lucy compared them with the documents already in her binder. One transaction appeared in the new records that had not been reflected clearly in the earlier information Randall had provided. Lucy checked the date. She checked the amount. She checked the account. This time, she did not react emotionally. She added it to the timeline. Another transaction appeared. Again, the earlier disclosure did not fully explain it. Lucy marked it. She contacted Maris. Maris reviewed the information. "These need to be addressed." Lucy nodded. "Does this mean Randall hid money?" Maris looked at the documents. "It means the records require clarification. We don't make the next conclusion until the evidence supports it." Lucy accepted that answer. That was exactly what she had been learning. A missing explanation was not automatically proof of deliberate wrongdoing. But a missing explanation could not simply be ignored either. The issue now needed proper examination. Randall's attorney began asking Randall about the transactions. The questions were more specific than before. Randall became increasingly frustrated. He had expected the divorce to focus on the marriage ending. Instead, the financial records were forcing both sides to examine years of decisions. Randall had once believed Lucy's binder was a sign that she was overwhelmed. Now it was becoming the document that kept bringing unresolved questions back to the table. Lucy continued doing her part. She corrected her own records when necessary. She preserved documents that supported Randall's explanations when the evidence supported them. She identified information that needed further review. She did not exaggerate. She did not hide her own mistakes. She did not pretend to be an expert. That was what made her records increasingly useful. By the time the next court date approached, the financial questions had become too significant to settle with casual explanations. Several transactions required additional documentation. Some earlier figures needed correction. Other information needed to be reconciled. The court would have to examine the financial disclosures more closely. Lucy placed the newest documents into the binder. She looked at the first page of her timeline. Reported, documented, needs verification. She had started with those 3 categories because she was afraid of making a mistake. Now they represented something else. Discipline. Lucy closed the binder. The divorce had changed. Randall could no longer rely on the assumption that Lucy would accept whatever explanation he gave her. But Lucy had also changed in another important way. She no longer believed that every discrepancy was proof that Randall had done something wrong. She was willing to let the evidence decide. The next hearing would determine how seriously the court needed to examine the financial information. And for the first time, Randall was going into court knowing that Lucy's questions were backed by records he could no longer dismiss. By the time Lucy entered the courtroom, the financial records had become the main issue. Randall was already seated beside his attorney. This time he did not look relaxed. His attorney had several documents spread across the table and was reviewing them carefully. Randall looked at one page, passed it over, and asked something quietly. His attorney answered without looking up. Lucy took her seat. Her binder was open. She had the latest records arranged in order. The disputed transactions were clearly marked. The retirement documents were separated from the ordinary household accounts. The records that had already been explained were in one section. The items still requiring clarification were in another. The judge entered the courtroom and reviewed the file. The hearing began. Randall's attorney presented the financial information first. The judge listened. Then he looked down at several statements. There are differences between these figures. Randall's attorney reviewed the documents. Yes, Your Honor. The judge pointed to one of the transactions. This transfer appears in one record, but is not reflected the same way in the earlier disclosure. The attorney checked the page. Lucy remained quiet. She had learned not to speak simply because she recognized a number. The judge looked toward Randall. Mr. Howard, do you have an explanation for this transaction? Randall looked toward his attorney. His attorney spoke first. We may need additional documentation before we can answer completely. The judge nodded. That was different from the earlier hearings. The court was no longer dealing with general statements about the family's finances. The documents were being examined individually. The judge reviewed another transaction. This one also requires clarification. Randall's attorney checked the records again. Lucy looked down at her notes. She had the same transaction in her timeline. She knew the date. She knew the amount. She knew which statement contained it. She also knew she did not know the full explanation. The judge looked at Lucy. Ms. Rubin, do you have documentation concerning this transaction? Yes, Your Honor. Lucy opened the binder. She turned to the correct section. She removed the statement and presented it through the proper process. The judge reviewed it. This confirms the transfer occurred. Yes, Your Honor. Do you know where the money went? No, Your Honor. I only know what the statement shows. The judge nodded. That answer mattered. Lucy had enough discipline now to stop there. She did not guess. She did not say Randall had taken the money. She did not say he had hidden it. She simply identified what the document established. The judge looked toward Randall's attorney. We need the receiving account information. The attorney nodded. We will provide it. Randall shifted in his chair. Lucy noticed but said nothing. The hearing continued. Another transfer was reviewed. This one had already been explained by a document Randall's attorney had provided. Lucy checked the record. The explanation matched. The judge moved on. Lucy did not challenge it. That was important. She was not there to object to every transaction involving Randall. She was there to help establish an accurate financial record. The judge reviewed another figure. This time, the amount differed between the earlier disclosure and the newer documentation. Lucy checked her notes. She had noticed the same difference. The judge looked toward her. Ms. Rubin, does your record reflect a different amount? Yes, Your Honor. Please show me. Lucy opened the binder. The page was already marked. She handed over the statement. The judge compared the figures. Randall's attorney reviewed it as well. There appears to be an additional transaction, he said. The judge looked at Randall. Do you know what that payment was for? Randall answered. It was related to an expense. The judge asked for supporting documentation. Randall's attorney said they would provide it. Lucy wrote the request in her notebook. She did not react. The hearing continued. The financial picture was becoming clearer. Money had moved between accounts. Some transfers had ordinary explanations. Some required additional records. Some amounts had been reported differently. The court was now asking for documentation rather than accepting general explanations. That was the change Lucy had been waiting for. Not because she wanted Randall embarrassed, because she wanted the financial record to be accurate. The judge eventually addressed the unresolved transactions. Based on the documents before the court, additional financial disclosure is necessary. Randall's attorney acknowledged the request. Lucy wrote down the next deadline. The judge also directed that the retirement information be reviewed properly because the issue involved more than simply dividing a number shown on a statement. Lucy understood why Maris had told her not to interpret those documents by herself. She had done the right thing by asking for professional help. The judge moved to the remaining issues. One disputed debt was discussed. Lucy had already acknowledged her connection to the credit card account. She did not try to change her position simply because the debt was inconvenient. When the judge asked whether she disputed being listed on the account, Lucy answered honestly, "No, Your Honor, I reviewed the original agreement. My name is on it." Randall looked at her. His attorney continued reviewing the records. The judge noted the admission. Lucy felt something unexpected. Relief. She had nothing to hide. She had corrected her own mistake before the court had to find it. That gave her confidence. The hearing continued for some time. When it finally ended, the judge ordered the additional records to be submitted before the financial issues could be fully resolved. Lucy gathered her papers. Randall stood beside his attorney. Neither of them spoke immediately. Outside the courtroom, Randall approached her. "You were ready for that." Lucy looked at him. "I prepared." "You had every transaction marked." "Not every transaction." Randall frowned. "The ones you questioned?" Lucy nodded. "I questioned the ones I couldn't explain." "You're making me look dishonest." Lucy shook her head. "I'm not trying to make you look like anything." "Then why keep bringing these things up?" "Because we're getting divorced, Randall. We have to know what the finances are." He looked at the binder. "You really think those papers tell the whole story?" "No." Randall seemed surprised. Lucy continued. "They tell me what I can verify." He did not answer. Lucy held the binder closer. "That is all I'm trying to do." Randall walked back toward his attorney. Lucy watched him leave. She did not feel like she had defeated him. The hearing had simply moved the divorce into a more serious stage. The court needed more records. Randall's side had to provide them. Lucy had to continue reviewing what she received. That was the process. As she drove home, Lucy thought about the woman who had first entered the courthouse carrying a binder she barely understood. That woman had been afraid of making mistakes. Now Lucy understood that mistakes were not the greatest danger. The greater danger was pretending to know something she could not prove. She placed the binder on the kitchen table when she got home. The next set of records would matter, because the court had now asked for documentation that could either explain the disputed transactions or raise more questions about them. The additional records began arriving the following week. Lucy received the first set and placed it beside the binder. She did not open everything at once. She started with the transactions the judge had identified. The first transfer had an explanation. The money had moved between accounts connected to an ordinary household expense. Lucy checked the date against an old receipt. The dates matched. She marked the transaction as explained. The second transfer was different. The records showed the money had moved, but the supporting document was incomplete. Lucy checked the account information. She checked the date. She checked the amount. Something was still missing. She marked it for clarification. The third transaction had initially concerned her. Now she had the supporting records. She read them carefully. The money had been used for an expense Randall had previously mentioned. Lucy added the documentation to the binder. Another question resolved. She understood something important. The fact that several transactions had reasonable explanations did not weaken her records. It strengthened them. She was building a financial history based on evidence instead of emotion. Keisha came over that evening. Lucy placed the new documents on the table. Some of them were completely ordinary. Keisha looked through the papers. "That is good. I thought finding something unusual was the point. No, understanding what happened is the point. Lucy nodded. They continued reviewing the records. Some transactions matched the explanations Randall had provided. Others did not have enough documentation. One amount appeared differently in 2 disclosures. Lucy checked the statements. The difference was real. She marked it. Another transaction had been listed without enough information to identify its purpose. Lucy marked that too. Keisha looked at the pages. You're not writing that Randall lied. No. Why? Because I don't know that. Keisha smiled. You've learned. Lucy smiled back. I've made enough mistakes to learn. They continued. One of the records connected with a payment Lucy had previously questioned. The new documentation explained it. Lucy removed the question from her unresolved list. Another item remained open. It needed more information. Lucy kept it there. She had stopped feeling pressured to force every problem into an answer. The next morning, Randall's attorney sent additional information through the legal process. Lucy reviewed it carefully. Randall had provided explanations for several of the transactions. Some were supported by documents, some were not. Lucy did not reject the explanations simply because they came from Randall. She compared them with the records. One explanation matched. She accepted it. Another explanation did not fully match the dates. She marked it for further clarification. A third explanation required documentation that had not yet been provided. She recorded that too. The process was slower than Lucy wanted, but it was becoming more accurate. Later that week, Lucy met with Maris. Maris reviewed the updated timeline. You've done a good job separating the confirmed information from the unresolved issues. Lucy pointed toward one section. This transaction has now been explained. Maris checked the supporting document. Yes. Lucy moved to another page. This one hasn't. Then leave it open. What if the explanation eventually makes sense? Update the record. And if it doesn't, let the proper process address it. Lucy nodded. She had wanted certainty from the beginning. Now she understood that accuracy sometimes meant accepting uncertainty until the evidence became sufficient. The financial review continued. Several items were resolved. Several needed additional documents. A few earlier figures required correction. Nothing suggested the kind of hidden fortune Lucy had once feared might exist. There was no secret pile of money waiting to transform her life. There was no dramatic discovery that would suddenly make her wealthy. There were simply years of financial decisions that had not always been documented clearly. That was enough to matter in a divorce. Randall was not pleased. His attorney had begun asking him for records he had not expected to revisit. One evening, Randall sat at home with the latest requests in front of him. He called Lucy. Did you ask for all these documents? Lucy answered honestly. The court requested additional disclosure. You know what this is doing? What? It's making everything take longer. Lucy looked at the binder. I know. You're questioning every transaction. No, I'm reviewing the transactions that don't have clear documentation. You're treating me like I'm guilty, Lucy answered calmly. I'm treating the financial records like financial records. Randall became quiet. Lucy continued. If something has a reasonable explanation and the documents support it, I record that. So you admit some of my explanations were right? Yes. That answer surprised him. You do? Of course. Lucy looked at the notes in front of her. If the evidence supports you, I'm not going to say otherwise. Randall did not respond. That conversation mattered because Lucy finally understood that fairness did not require her to take sides. She could disagree with Randall without deciding he was wrong about everything. She could question a transaction without accusing him of deliberately hiding money. She could also acknowledge when he was correct. That was the standard she had chosen. The next court date approached. Lucy reviewed the updated records. Several issues had been resolved. Several remained. The retirement account still required proper treatment, because the tax consequences could not be determined simply from the balance shown on a statement. The disputed debt remained part of the financial picture. One valuation Lucy had questioned also required further review. She had initially expected that number to prove something important. The newer records suggested otherwise. Lucy accepted that. She corrected her notes. The number was not as far from Randall's figure as she had first believed. She felt disappointed for a moment. Then she remembered what she had learned. The purpose was not to win every disagreement. The purpose was to reach the truth. At the next hearing, the judge reviewed the additional documentation. Some transactions were accepted because the records supported their explanations. Others required further clarification. The disputed figures were adjusted where the documentation supported an adjustment. Where the evidence did not establish a problem, the court did not treat suspicion as proof. Lucy listened carefully. She did not celebrate when Randall's explanation was rejected. She did not feel defeated when one of her own concerns turned out to be ordinary. She simply took notes. At one point, the judge looked at one of Lucy's documents. "This supports the explanation provided by Mr. Howard." Lucy nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Randall looked toward her. She did not react. Another document was reviewed. This one showed that an earlier figure had been incomplete. The judge ordered the financial information to be corrected. Lucy wrote it down. That was the pattern. One record supported Randall. Another required correction. A third needed more information. Nothing happened simply because one person spoke with confidence. The documents carried the weight. By the end of the hearing, Lucy understood something she had not expected. The truth was not always going to give her the answer she wanted. Sometimes it would help Randall. Sometimes it would help her. Sometimes it would simply show that neither side had enough information yet. That was acceptable. Outside the courthouse, Randall approached her again. "You seem different." Lucy looked at him. "I've learned a lot. You don't seem angry anymore. I am still hurt." Randall nodded. "But you're not trying to punish me." Lucy looked toward the courthouse. "No." "Why?" "Because punishment isn't what I'm here for." Randall looked at the binder. "Then what are you here for?" Lucy answered without hesitation. "To make sure the records are right." Randall looked away. For years he had believed Lucy's careful nature was simply part of her personality. Now he understood that the same quality he had once dismissed was helping her navigate the hardest financial situation of her life. Lucy returned home that evening and placed the updated documents into the binder. The financial picture was clearer. It was not perfect. It was not entirely in her favor. It was not entirely in Randall's favor. But it was becoming accurate. Lucy had finally stopped measuring success by whether Randall was proven wrong. She measured it by whether the information before the court could withstand examination. The remaining issues were serious. The retirement assets still needed proper treatment. The disputed debt had to be addressed. The valuation had to be settled. And the court still needed to make its final financial determinations. Lucy closed the binder. The next stage would not be about discovering some dramatic secret. It would be about deciding what the documented evidence meant for the end of their 11-year marriage. The final financial hearing came after the remaining records had been reviewed. Lucy arrived early. She carried the same binder she had brought to every hearing. It was thicker now. Inside were years of statements, corrected figures, supporting documents, notes, and records that had once meant very little to her. Now she understood what most of them showed. Randall arrived with his attorney. He looked tired. The divorce had taken longer than either of them expected, and the financial questions had forced both sides to review years of decisions. Lucy sat down. The judge reviewed the file. The remaining issues were addressed one by one. The first was the disputed credit card debt. Lucy had originally believed the debt belonged entirely to Randall. She had corrected that mistake after reviewing the original agreement. The judge considered the account documents. Lucy listened carefully. Part of the debt was assigned to her because the agreement showed that she was also responsible for the account. Lucy accepted the decision. She did not argue against a document she had already confirmed herself. The next issue involved the valuation Lucy had questioned. She had originally believed the figure was significantly different from the actual value. The additional records told a more complicated story. The difference was smaller than she had first thought. The court reviewed the supporting information. The valuation was adjusted, but not to the amount Lucy had initially expected. Lucy accepted that too. She had learned that being wrong did not make her foolish. Refusing to correct the mistake would have been foolish. The judge moved to the financial transactions. Several had already been explained. The records supported Randall's explanations in some cases. Other figures had been corrected because the earlier information was incomplete. The court treated each issue separately. Lucy watched the process carefully. Nothing was decided because Randall sounded confident. Nothing was decided because Lucy had spent weeks organizing papers. The documents determined the outcome. One transaction that had concerned Lucy turned out to have a legitimate explanation. The court accepted it. Lucy wrote a note. Another figure had been reported incorrectly. The court ordered the information corrected. Lucy wrote that down too. A third issue did not have enough information to support the original figure. The court required the proper documentation. The process was careful. It was not dramatic. That was exactly what Lucy had come to understand. Real financial disputes were not solved by one person delivering a perfect speech. They were solved by records, explanations, corrections, professional advice, and careful review. The retirement assets were addressed next. Lucy had already learned that she could not simply look at the balance and decide what belonged to each person. The court considered the appropriate information and the tax consequences. The retirement assets would be handled according to the proper legal process. Lucy wrote down the instructions. She understood enough to know that she needed to follow them carefully. Randall sat beside his attorney. He looked down at the table. The confidence he had carried into the first hearing was gone, but Lucy did not feel satisfaction. She had expected the final hearing to feel different. She had imagined that reaching the end would bring relief. Instead, she mostly felt tired. 11 years of marriage had been reduced to financial documents, legal decisions, and the practical work of separating two lives. The judge addressed the remaining matters. The financial information would be corrected where necessary. The disputed issues had been resolved according to the evidence. The retirement assets would be handled properly. The debt would be divided according to the documented responsibility. The marriage would end. Lucy listened. She had wanted fairness. She had not expected fairness to mean receiving everything she wanted. Fairness meant accepting the same evidence whether it helped her or not. When the hearing ended, Lucy closed her binder. She looked at Randall. For 11 years she had known his habits. She knew how he took his coffee. She knew which meals he liked. She knew how he reacted when work became stressful. She knew the sound of his footsteps coming through the front door. Now they were no longer husband and wife. There was no argument, no final insult, no dramatic exchange. They simply left the courtroom separately. Lucy drove home. She placed the binder on the kitchen table. For the first time in months, she did not need to prepare for another hearing. She opened the binder. The first pages contained the records she had gathered when she was frightened. The later pages contained corrections, questions, explanations, documents she had requested, records she had received. She remembered how embarrassed she had been when she discovered the credit card mistake. At the time, she had thought being wrong meant she was failing. Now she saw it differently. The mistake had taught her one of the most important lessons of the entire process. Being prepared did not mean knowing everything. It meant being willing to find out the truth, even when the truth corrected you. A few days later, Randall returned to the house to collect the rest of his belongings. Lucy was in the living room when he walked inside. He looked around. The house was quieter than it had been during the marriage. Randall picked up a box. Then he noticed the binder on the table. He walked closer. "You still have all of that?" Lucy looked at him. "Yes." Randall opened it. He turned through the pages: mortgage records, insurance records, receipts, bank statements, payment histories, documents from years they had shared. He looked at Lucy. "You kept all these?" "I kept most of them." Randall turned another page. He saw dates from years earlier. He saw records of repairs. He saw insurance renewals. He saw payments Lucy had tracked. He saw notes she had made before the divorce ever began. For several moments, he said nothing. Then he looked at her. "I didn't realize you did all this." Lucy answered simply, "I did." Randall looked down at the binder. "I thought you just kept papers." Lucy looked at him. "I was keeping track of our life." Stayed between them. Randall closed the binder. He sat down. "I treated you like you didn't understand money." Lucy did not deny it. "You did." "I was wrong." Lucy looked at him. "I know." Randall looked surprised by the answer. "I thought because I earned more, I understood more." Lucy nodded. "That happened over time." "I know." He looked around the room. "I should have listened more." Lucy did not tell him that everything would have worked out if he had. She did not know that. Their marriage had ended. Some things could not be repaired simply because both people finally understood what had gone wrong. Randall picked up his box. Before leaving, he looked back at Lucy. "I am sorry." Lucy accepted the apology. She did not pretend it erased the past. It did not. But she no longer needed an apology to decide how she would live. After Randall left, Lucy returned to the kitchen. She opened the binder one more time. The first page showed the woman she had been when the divorce began. She had been afraid. She had believed Randall knew more because he earned more. She had believed she needed to understand everything before she could protect herself. She had been wrong about some things, right about others, and willing to correct both. Lucy closed the binder. The divorce had not made her wealthy. It had not destroyed Randall. It had not given her some unbelievable courtroom victory. It had given her something quieter. She trusted her own judgment now, not blindly, not arrogantly. She trusted herself enough to ask questions. She trusted herself enough to check the records. She trusted herself enough to admit when she was wrong. And she trusted herself enough to ask for qualified help when when something was beyond her knowledge. That was the real change. Lucy had entered the divorce believing that strength meant proving she could handle everything alone. She left understanding that strength also meant knowing when not to handle something alone. The house was quiet that evening. Lucy prepared dinner for herself. For the first time in months, she did not have another court date to prepare for. She did not have another financial statement to chase. She did not have to convince anyone that she understood her own life. She simply sat at the kitchen table. The binder remained beside her. It had started as a collection of records. During the divorce, it became evidence. By the end, it had become a reminder. Lucy had spent years believing peace required her to stay quiet. She finally understood that peace built on silence was not the same as peace built on self-respect. She had lost her marriage, but she had found her voice. And that was the part of herself she would never again hand over to someone else. The divorce was over. For the first few days, Lucy kept expecting another document to arrive, another hearing date, another request for financial records, another reason to open the binder. Nothing came. The house felt different without the pressure of the divorce hanging over everything. Lucy still thought about Randall. She remembered the good years. She remembered the man she had married, not just the man she had divorced. That distinction mattered. Their marriage had not been a lie. They had loved each other. They had built a home together. They had shared ordinary years that had contained real happiness. The problem was that love had not stopped Randall from changing. It had not stopped Lucy from becoming quieter. It had not protected either of them from the habits that slowly damaged the marriage. Lucy finally understood her own part in that. She had allowed Randall to become the person who made most of the important financial decisions. She had accepted his answers because challenging him felt harder. She had mistaken silence for peace. That did not make the marriage her fault. It simply meant she had something to learn from it. One evening, Lucy sat at the kitchen table with the old binder nearby. She opened it. The first pages reminded her of how frightened she had been when the divorce began. She had been worried about money. She had been worried about losing the house. She had been worried about legal costs. Most of all, she had been worried that Randall was right about her. Maybe she really did not understand enough. Maybe she had relied on him for too long. Maybe she would not be able to manage on her own. Those fears had been real, but they had not been facts. Lucy had learned that difference the hard way. She had made mistakes. She had corrected them. She had asked questions. She had accepted professional help. She had learned what she could understand and what required someone with greater expertise. That was what she wanted to carry into her new life. Not bitterness, not revenge, knowledge. The next week, Randall contacted her about a few remaining practical matters connected with the house. Their conversation was brief. They discussed what needed to be handled. Neither raised the old arguments. When the conversation ended, Lucy realized something had changed. She no longer needed Randall to admit that she had been right. She no longer needed him to understand every hurt he had caused. She had spent too many years waiting for recognition. Now she could move forward without it. Randall had his own life to rebuild. Lucy had hers. Their marriage had ended, but that did not require either of them to turn the other person into a monster. Randall had made choices that hurt her. Lucy had made choices that kept the marriage going longer than it should have. They could both acknowledge those truths. Neither needed to rewrite the entire 11 years. Lucy understood that more clearly as time passed. She missed Randall sometimes. She missed having someone to call when something funny happened. She missed the routines they had created. She missed some of the ordinary parts of being married. But missing someone was not the same as needing them back. That lesson took time. Some mornings, Lucy reached for her phone because she wanted to tell Randall something. She stopped herself. Not because she was angry, because she was learning to live without automatically making him part of every decision. That was new. She had spent 11 years building a life around two people. Now she had to learn how to build one around herself. Lucy started small. She reviewed her own budget. She organized her personal documents. She checked her insurance. She created a new financial file that belonged only to her. She made decisions without asking whether Randall would approve. When she did not know something, she asked someone qualified. When she understood something, she trusted herself enough to act. Her confidence did not appear all at once. It grew through ordinary decisions. One afternoon, Lucy looked at the old kitchen table where she had once spread 11 years of financial records. She remembered how frightened she had been. Now she looked at the same table differently. It was simply a table. The fear had been hers. The table had never controlled her. Randall had not controlled her either. For years, Lucy had given his confidence more authority than it deserved. She finally understood that. That realization did not make her angry, it made her free. A few weeks later, Randall sent a message about another practical matter. Lucy answered clearly. There was no need to explain herself. There was no need to defend her decisions. There was no need to reopen the marriage. The exchange ended. Lucy placed her phone down and continued with her evening. That ordinary moment meant more to her than any courtroom decision. She was no longer waiting for Randall to define what happened next. She was making her own decisions. The marriage had ended, the lesson had not. Lucy knew she would carry parts of those 11 years with her for the rest of her life. The good memories would remain. The painful ones would remain too. But neither would control her future. She had learned that love could be genuine and still fail. She had learned that two people could care about each other and still develop habits that made a healthy marriage impossible. She had learned that self-respect sometimes begins with something as simple as saying, "I need to understand this." Lucy closed the binder. For the first time, she did not see it as a reminder of the divorce. She saw it as proof that she had learned how to stand on her own, and that was where her new life began. The quiet, after the divorce, took some getting used to. Lucy had spent months checking dates, organizing records, answering legal requests, and preparing for hearings. Now her evenings belonged to her again. At first, she did not know what to do with them. She would come home from work, put her keys on the counter, and instinctively think about the next task. There was always another document before. Now there was only dinner, laundry, bills, and the ordinary responsibilities of life. Lucy began rebuilding her routine. She reviewed her personal budget. She organized her own accounts. She checked her insurance. She created a folder for her new financial records. This time, the records were hers alone. She did not feel helpless when she opened them. She felt responsible. At work, another change began. Lucy had become more willing to speak when something did not make sense. One afternoon, she was reviewing a spreadsheet when she noticed a figure that did not match the supporting information. She checked it twice. The number was wrong. In the past, she might have kept quiet until someone else noticed. This time, she walked over to the person responsible for the spreadsheet. "I think this figure needs to be checked." The person looked at the page. "Are you sure?" Lucy pointed to the supporting number. "This amount here doesn't match the total." They checked it together. Lucy was right. The figure was corrected. It was a small moment. Nobody applauded. Nobody made a speech. Lucy simply returned to her desk. But she felt different. She had spoken because something needed to be checked. She had not worried about sounding difficult. She had not waited for someone with a louder voice to notice first. She had trusted what she could verify. That confidence followed her outside work. Lucy began volunteering at the community center with Tariq Ellison. The idea started with a simple conversation about how many people struggled with ordinary paperwork. Some residents were afraid to read financial documents. Others kept important papers in different places. Some signed agreements without understanding the terms. Tariq helped Lucy organize a small workshop. Keisha agreed to help explain ordinary financial records. Maris agreed to explain when someone should seek qualified legal assistance. Lucy made the purpose clear from the beginning. This isn't about becoming your own lawyer or accountant. The people sitting around the room listened. It is about knowing enough to recognize what you don't understand. The first workshop was small. Only a few people came. Lucy did not mind. She remembered how difficult it had been for her to admit that she needed help. She began with simple things. Keep important documents together. Know what accounts are in your name. Read before signing. Check numbers against supporting records. Keep copies of important paperwork. Ask questions when something does not make sense. And when an issue goes beyond your knowledge, get qualified help. Keisha explained ordinary financial records. She showed people how to read basic income information and understand common deductions. Maris explained that legal questions should be handled by qualified professionals. Lucy shared what she had learned without pretending to be an expert. She told them about the importance of separating facts from assumptions. She explained that a strange number did not automatically mean someone had done something wrong. It meant the number needed to be checked. The people in the room understood that. After the workshop, one older woman approached Lucy. "I have a box of papers at home that I haven't looked at in years." Lucy smiled. "Start with one folder." The woman laughed. "That simple? One folder?" The woman thanked her. Another person asked where to begin with their household records. Lucy gave the same advice. Start with what you know. Mark what needs verification. Get professional help when necessary. The workshop slowly grew. People told relatives. Relatives told friends. The room became fuller. Lucy never changed the message. She did not promise that paperwork could solve every problem. She taught people how to become less afraid of the documents affecting their lives. That was enough. One evening after a workshop, Lucy sat with Keisha and reviewed the materials for the next meeting. Keisha looked at her. "You know what I noticed?" "What?" "You don't apologize every time you ask a question anymore." Lucy laughed. "I used to do that? All the time." Lucy thought about it. She realized Keisha was right. For years she had softened questions because she did not want to appear difficult. Now she asked directly. She did not demand answers she had no right to. She simply wanted to understand. That difference mattered. Maris also noticed the change. "You've become more comfortable knowing your limits," she told Lucy. Lucy smiled. "I finally understand that knowing my limits doesn't make me weak." "No," Maris said. "It keeps you from making avoidable mistakes." Lucy carried that lesson into every part of her life. She still missed Randall sometimes, she still remembered their good years, but her life was no longer organized around what she had lost. It was becoming organized around what she could build. The community work gave her purpose. Her job gave her stability. Her own financial records gave her independence. Her friendships gave her support. Most importantly, she had stopped treating her voice as something that required permission. One Saturday, Lucy stood in front of the community center, preparing the room for another workshop. The chairs were nearly full. Keisha was organizing the financial handouts. Maris had prepared information about when people should seek legal assistance. Tariq was helping arrange the tables. Lucy looked around the room. A year earlier, she had been sitting alone at her kitchen table, frightened by a stack of financial records. Now she was helping other people approach their own paperwork with less fear. She did not tell them she had all the answers. She told them where to begin. That was more honest and more useful. When the workshop started, Lucy stood at the front. Most people don't have a problem because they are incapable of understanding their paperwork. She looked around the room. They have a problem because they are afraid to ask what it means. The room became attentive. Lucy continued. "Start with one document, read it, check the numbers, keep the records. If you don't understand something, ask someone qualified." She smiled. "You don't have to know everything to take responsibility for your own life." The words came naturally now. They were not something Lucy had read in a book. She had learned them through 11 years of marriage, a painful divorce, financial mistakes, and the decision to keep learning instead of giving up. When the workshop ended, several people stayed to ask questions. Lucy answered the ones she could. For the others, she pointed them toward the appropriate professional help. She no longer felt embarrassed by saying, "I don't know." She had finally learned that those 3 words could be the beginning of wisdom, rather than a confession of weakness. 1 year after the divorce, Lucy returned to the old house to collect the last of her belongings. She had not been there in months. The house looked familiar. The same kitchen, the same cabinets, the same table where she had spent countless evenings sorting bills and, later, 11 years of financial records. Lucy walked through the room slowly, checking the boxes she had left behind. There were old clothes, family photographs, a few books, some kitchen items. She found one box she had forgotten about. Inside were old household records. Lucy carried the box into the kitchen. The binder was there too. She had almost forgotten it. She picked it up. A year earlier, that binder had represented fear. It had contained everything she was afraid to discover. Now she saw it differently. It contained proof of how much she had learned. Lucy opened the first section. There were old mortgage records, insurance documents, bank statements, payment histories, her handwritten notes. She turned through the pages. There were also corrections. One page showed the credit card debt she had misunderstood. Her original assumption was crossed out. Beside it was the corrected information. Lucy smiled. She was not embarrassed anymore. That mistake had taught her something she needed to learn. She turned another page. There were transactions she had once suspected were important. Some had been explained. Others had required additional documentation. She had accepted both outcomes. That was what made the binder valuable. It did not tell a story in which Lucy had been right about everything. It showed that she had been willing to follow the evidence even when it corrected her. She closed the binder. Lucy had not become a lawyer. She had not become wealthy. She had not destroyed Randall. She had not walked away from the divorce with some extraordinary prize. She had gained something more useful. She trusted herself, not blindly. Not because she believed she could handle every problem alone. She trusted herself enough to ask questions, enough to check documents, enough to admit mistakes, enough to seek qualified help. That was a stronger kind of confidence. Lucy carried the binder to her car with the last box. Before leaving, she looked around the kitchen one final time. She remembered the evenings when she and Randall had eaten dinner there. She remembered their arguments. She remembered the nights when they laughed. She remembered the night he told her he wanted a divorce. She remembered sitting at that same table, frightened by the financial records. The memories did not disappear. They simply stopped controlling her. Lucy locked the door and left. Her life had moved forward. A few weeks later, the community center held another financial literacy workshop. This one was larger than the first. Young adults sat beside older residents. Married couples sat beside people who had gone through divorce. Some came because they wanted to organize their household records. Others wanted to understand documents they had avoided for years. Lucy stood at the front of the room. Keisha sat nearby. Maris had provided information explaining when people should seek legal assistance. Tariq helped organize the room. Lucy looked at the people waiting for her to begin. She knew exactly what she wanted them to understand. Knowing about your finances does not mean you have to handle everything yourself. She held up a folder. It means you should understand what you can, recognize what you don't understand, and know when to ask for help. The room was quiet. Lucy continued. Keep your important records together. Read what you sign. Check the numbers. If something doesn't make sense, don't guess. She looked toward Keisha. Ask someone who understands the financial side. Then she looked toward the information Maris had provided. If the problem is legal, get qualified legal advice. Nobody in the room needed a dramatic story. They needed practical information. Lucy gave them that. One young man asked how long he should keep financial records. An older woman asked how to organize papers from several years of marriage. A married couple asked how they could make sure both spouses understood their household finances. Lucy answered what she could. When she reached a question outside her knowledge, she said so. She no longer feared those words. I don't know. That is something you should ask a qualified professional. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned her ability. They understood. After the workshop, several people stayed behind. Lucy helped one woman organize a folder. She showed another person how to separate documents by category. Keisha answered questions about ordinary financial records. Maris's information helped people understand when legal assistance was appropriate. The work continued long after Lucy finished speaking. That was the part she liked most. People were leaving with something they could use. Not fear, not false confidence, a practical starting point. Later that evening, Lucy sat outside the community center with Keisha and Tariq. Keisha looked at her. You realize this started because of your divorce. Lucy smiled. I know, and now you're helping other people. Lucy looked toward the building. I never planned it. Tariq laughed. Most useful things don't start with a plan. Lucy thought about that. Her divorce had forced her to examine parts of her life she had avoided. The records had taught her to question assumptions. The mistakes had taught her humility. The legal process had taught her when professional help was necessary. The experience had changed the way she worked. It had changed the way she spoke. It had changed the way she saw herself. Lucy had once believed that Randall's income gave him greater authority. Now she understood that income and knowledge were different things. She had also learned that knowledge did not make her superior to anyone else. It simply gave her a responsibility to use what she knew carefully. That was the lesson she wanted others to carry. A person does not need to understand everything, but nobody should be afraid to understand what affects their own life. Lucy looked at the building one more time. A year earlier, she had been trying to survive the end of her marriage. Now she was helping other people become less afraid of theirs. Her life was not perfect. She still had difficult days. She still remembered Randall. She still had moments when she wished things had ended differently. But she no longer believed that losing her marriage meant losing herself. She had spent 11 years building a life with another person. When that life ended, she discovered that she still had the ability to build again. This time, she was building with a clearer understanding of who she was. Lucy stood and picked up her bag. The binder was inside. She no longer carried it because she was afraid. She carried it because it reminded her of the woman she had become, a woman who could admit when she was wrong, a woman who could challenge information without making accusations, a woman who could ask for help without feeling ashamed, a woman who could speak without waiting for someone else to approve her voice. The divorce had taken something from Lucy. It had taken a marriage she once believed would last, but it had also forced her to confront something she had been giving away for years. Her confidence, her judgment, her voice. She had finally taken those things back. And that was her real victory. Not winning against Randall. not proving that she was smarter, not walking away with more money. It was learning that another person's confidence, income, or authority did not determine her ability. Lucy could respect expertise without surrendering her judgment. She could seek help without surrendering responsibility. She could love someone without allowing that person to decide her worth. That was the life she built after the divorce. And this time, she was building it with both eyes open.